So what we're going to be talking about right now is routing, mixing, exporting, just basic stuff. I'm not going to go into, like, we're gonna talk. I've already talked about it in a few of the other lessons. We're just going to go over it real quick here, just to make sure we're all on the same page with stuff. But it's all very similar to Pro Tools and Logic and how I've explained stuff in Pro Tools and Logic. A couple of key differences is that Live does not have aux tracks and it does not use buses the same way that Pro Tools does or Logic does. Logic and Pro Tools are potatoes and potatoes. Ableton Live is oranges in this case, in that Live and Pro Tools both use aux tracks and they both use buzzes. Ableton Live does not use either, but you can still get it to work in a very similar function with when you're doing subgroup mixing, but you just have to know how to do it slightly differently. Now, before we talk about the way that I do them in Logic and Pro Tools, I want to show you the way that we can do them in all three of them exactly the same way. And the way that is I've got my drums here. Let me go ahead and mute my instruments. I'm gonna get rid of the panning here. Okay, so I've got all three of these. If I want to subgroup these, I'm just gonna hit Command G, highlight them all, hit Command G, and now it just made a group, drum group, boom. And now I can put effects on this one group here, and we're good to go. The reason I don't use this is because if I wanted to have effects over here on my reverb, I cannot send them to the drum group. See how there's no option for sending them over to the drum group? So I can't send them to the drum group over here. So if I wanted to have, like, let's have this one called drum reverb here. Let me make it orange. And let's send over my hi-hats. We're gonna make this a little bit smaller of a room, so it's not like a big old giant hall. Okay, cool, sounds more like a room there. But I can't put it into here. So if I wanted to really subgroup everything, because watch what's gonna happen here. Oh, interesting. Oh, it's been a while since I've used Ableton Live like this. I guess it's turning down the send amount here for that one as well, which is, it's kind of nice. It still doesn't really solve all my problems though, which is if I wanted to compress my reverb with my drums, I would want to have it. But one thing it does do, which is really cool, that I feel like it didn't used to do, but maybe it did, and I just never noticed it, is that it's turning down the level of my send over here to my reverb as well, which is great. But what if I want to pull my reverb into the compressor that I use over here? So let's say that I'm using a multiband dynamics compressor, multiband compression here. Let's say I'm using multiband compression here and I wanted my reverb to be part of that multiband compression. Well, I really want it to be inside going to the drum group over here. So here's how we would do that. First of all, I'm just going to Command-Shift-G to ungroup all that stuff. And I'm going to colorize everything here. Great. And I'm going to make a new audio track, and it's over here in the notes. To subgroup in Live, you need to make an audio track act like an aux track. So step number one is we set audio from to no input. So I'm going to go in here. I've got my audio here. I'm going to set this. It goes audio. Oh, I don't have any. Hold on. Let's just set this up for external microphone. There we go. So I set this up for external input like this. Now this is how it would come up in the beginning. I've got a default setting for mine, so it's not going to show up like this. But what you do is you go audio from, you set this to no input, like that. Boom. And then give it a name, drum group. That's really important that you name it. Now I go over to my individual tracks and I set audio to here to say drum group. Whatever I just name that track. There we go. So set monitor to in, name the track drum group. Okay, so go over here and set monitor to in, boom. Name the track drum group, select all the tracks you want to subgroup. And I think number 2 and 3 should be, well, I think number 2 here should be kind of more at the end of stuff. Yeah, it should be step number 5, actually. It should be after step number 5, number 2. So now when I do this, though, everything is going through this track. Now you can see that in this case, we can still hear my reverb. That's because I haven't routed my reverb. Let's route the reverb over to that drum group track. There we go. Now the cool thing about this is, now my reverb is being compressed with everything else. It's being compressed with everything else. So now you got that reverb in there. In this case, the reverb might be a little bit hot. There it is, dry. There we are. Cool. And that's, I would just change the color here of this track, and that's essentially how you do it. It's not that different from Logic and Pro Tools, but with Logic and Pro Tools, you have to set up buses, and you have to set up the input and the output and the buses. For this, you do not have to set up an input, you just have to make sure it says no input. And you don't have to do that part. I just like to do that to make sure I don't have any feedback loops. And then you just set everything to go to the drum group. Go, and that's like, there's a nice little diagram right here for you. So I've got all my tracks that I want to set to my drum group. Make sure they all say audio to drum group. Make sure the track that is called drum group says audio from in the monitor, no input, and the monitor is set to in. So all of the track outs set to subgroup track name, and the audio from is no input, and the monitor is set to in. And there you go. Now you're going to hear everything, and it's going to work out really well. And don't forget that you can do that with your effects as well that are for that for those sounds. You're not always going to want to do that, and a few of you asked me, when should I do that and when should I not do it? And the answer is whatever I told you at that time. So if you want the reverb to be in there and you want it to be part of the signal, then you would subgroup the reverb with it. But if you don't want it to be part of the signal, if you're like super over compressing your drums and you want the reverb to stay more natural, then you're going to have the reverb outside of your drum group there. So this is the first way I just showed you before. Subgrouping and live, select all the tracks you want to subgroup, hit Command G. Click the group symbol to expand or collapse the groups, which is great. And so now both Logic and Pro Tools have this style of grouping. Logic has their folder stacks or track stacks, and then Pro Tools has their folders as well. So they both kind of jumped on this bandwagon that Ableton Live started a while back ago. All right, setting up send effects in Ableton Live. This is actually really easy. You just have all these send levels here. For every return track, you have another effect. So if I hit Command Option T, I can make more return tracks here. I can make up to, I think it's 15 or something like that. And so I have all these, and now we have all these sends. Now, as you can see here, it starts to take up space on my screen. So if I don't need to see my sends, I can just hit Command Option S to hide my sends, or Command Option S to show them. Command Option S will hide or show my send levels, and also for my return tracks, Command Option R to hide or show the return tracks. If you don't remember those shortcuts, right down here, boom, Command Option R or S to show or hide that stuff there. Okay. Now I don't need this many returns right now, so let's get rid of some of these. So I have 1, 2, 3 here. Let's go ahead on this one. Let's throw in a Sound Toys effect rack over here on this third return. And let's go over here to our music box and hit play on this. Turn that up a little bit. Now let's pull up some kind of cool spaces. Make sure you turn that mix all the way up. And now I can use that, so I just go over here to my sends. That's funny, it's like glitching. All right. That's interesting. It's showing me all the space for the other ones because I don't know why it's showing me that. That's weird. Anyway, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to find a different preset in here. Let's just use the arrow keys. Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, let's use that. And I can see this here. Now, the name of it here is Effect Rack because that's the plugin that I dragged onto it. Let's just change the name of my return here and just call this one Big Echo. Now, when I mouse over my A, B, and C, look down here in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, down to this area down here. If I mouse over A, B, or C, A, it tells me what the name of my return tracks are. And you're really going to want to use this because A, B, and C doesn't really mean anything, and there's no way to rename those A, B, and C. They're just A, B, and C. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we mouse over them and change things and take a look in the lower left-hand corner about what track it is. Especially when you have like 10 different return tracks, it becomes much better. Music loop. Cool. All right, people are angry on 6F. Okay, and that's this note right down here. When you mouse over a send knob, Live will show the return track name in the status bar in the bottom left-hand corner. Your sends in the arrangement view look a little bit different. They look like this. So let's go over here and check those out. Go to my arrangement view, and that the sends are over here, these little boxes here, and they show just how much level I'm sending to each one. So I just click and drag. Of course, the closer to 0 you are, the higher the send amount is, the more the send amount there is. All right, return tracks. You can send a return track to another return track by right-clicking on the correct send knob and selecting Enable Send. So, for example, if I have my, let's say this percussion here, let's send it over to the delay as well. Cool. Awesome. So we have this in here. Let's put the Echo Boy in here instead. Cool. Okay, so it's got a cool, like, kind of delay on here. I'm gonna make it a little bit louder. Awesome. So let's say we like that delay, but we want to go into that same reverb that the percussion is going to. So what I can do is I can just go over here. Let's just call this one delay. And I'm going to right-click on the track I want to send it to, the send I want to send it to. So I right-click on A, because I want it to go to that same reverb, and I click on Enable Send, like that. And now I just turn this up. And now it's got a nice little bit of reverb on it itself as well. Okay. Now what you want to make sure is that you don't send it to itself unless you know what you're doing, because that will of course cause a feedback loop, and the feedback loop can get really nasty really quick, and it's something I don't really recommend that you set up unless you absolutely know what you're doing. And I'm not even going to really talk about or recommend it to this world as a whole, because it can get dangerous real quick. So you can also assign the return tracks audio to any destination you want, which we talked about before. This enables you to subgroup your reverb or delays, stuff like that. So if I wanted to go in here and subgroup my delay into that drum group, I can just do that. Boom, there we go. Just again, if you are doing that, just make sure that you, make shimmer pads, Make sure that you do not send the drum group to your reverb or your delay, because again, feedback loops. Whenever you're doing any of this stuff, when you're starting to send things around to different places, if you're not sure if you're going to create a feedback loop or not, turn the volume down on your output. Okay, you're not going to destroy Ableton Live. There was a point in time when if you sent a delay, it created a feedback loop with a delay in Ableton Live, it actually crashed the program. It doesn't do that anymore, or unless it's like a really bad feedback loop, I guess. But now you can actually create feedback loops within Ableton Live to create dub delays and really cool sounds in kind of like an analog type of manner. But you have to be careful with it. So my advice is that if you're not sure if what you're about to do is going to create a feedback loop or not, take your headphones off. Turn the volume down to your headphones, because this is physical and it will break. Ableton Live, it's not physical, it's not going to break, but you might crash it, but you'll be able to open it back up again and just take that feedback loop off of there. So you have to be careful when you're doing this kind of stuff, but I'm not saying don't experiment. You should definitely experiment with it. Just be safe, okay? All right, mix tip. Faders can be extended. I'm gonna hide my sends because they're doing that weird thing. Faders can be extended. If I click and drag right here, my faders can be extended. There's that. So I usually keep them right about here because I don't need them to be too long. A is the peak level and B is the fader level. That's A and B right there. That's right down here. So this is my peak. If I want to reset that back to 0, I just click on it and it goes back to 0. If I want to adjust my level, I can click on the fader, this triangle thing itself, or I can click in here on the number in here and click and drag it up and down. I can also click on this and type in a number and hit return. Oops. Like that. Okay, cool. All right, so we got that there. General tips, the master fader, the Q out, you can set your headphones out separate from your main out depending on your audio interface. You need to do this when you're DJing, so you can do that right over here. The Q out can be set to a separate output depending on your audio interface. This audio interface only has 2 outputs, outputs 1 and 2, so I don't have any options with this one, but my other audio interface does have 4 outputs, so I can set up outputs 1 and 2 or outputs 3 and 4. And if you have a separate output, like this one might have a separate output for the headphones. I think it does. So I could actually set that up and do that right over here for my Q out if I'm using Ableton Live for DJing. Your send, pre, or post fader is based on the return track, not based on the sending track. This is different from Logic or Pro Tools. And it's kind of weird that Ableton Live did it like this. Whereas in Ableton Live, everything else is usually set by the individual piece, like the clip or something like that. Where in this case, it's actually set by the track. So if I want to set something for a pre, I click on it here to make it pre fader or versus post fader. And I think the reason why they did that was because you know, usually if you're using pre fader, it's for something like a headphone mix. So they figured that whole entire return track is going to be all pre-fader. It kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of headphone mixes. It doesn't really make sense if you're thinking about it in terms of like special effects and stuff like that. But if you're doing special effects, you're probably resampling them anyway. The Q amount down here, which is this one down here, also sets your audition levels. So if I wanted to click on samples and things like that, like I go over here to my Sample Magic and we're listening to these. If I want to listen to them louder, turn it up over here. Oh, what's up, Sonny? Oh, you forgot to put your name in the chat. That's all right. I understand. And who else came in earlier was Rilla. Rilla also forgot to put his name in the chat as well. Yeah, make sure you always put your name in the chat. Yep, I got you. I got you. I mean, you're always on time, Sonny. So you're always like one of the first people in here. So, all right. So where else are we going here? Is this an actual class? It is an actual class, Owl. Okay, freeze and flatten tracks. Okay, yep. So this is great. I've got this track here and I want to freeze and flatten it. Let's say I want to turn this into a sample that I want to mess around with. this beat loop here. So let's say I wanted to turn this into like an actual loop, like that's an audio loop. Right now you can see it's actually a MIDI drum beat here. Well, what I can do is I can right click on the name. Amir, I got you. Yep. Oh yeah, you're welcome, Curvy Blonde. So I can right click on here and go down here to freeze track. Now what this is going to do is it's going to freeze the track, which puts the audio into a kind of a holding space. It doesn't actually show us the audio, but it does allow us to move the clips around. Now this is a really interesting difference between Logic and Pro Tools. When you freeze tracks in Logic or Pro Tools, you can't touch the track, it's locked into place. If you touch the track, it has to refreeze it. Like Logic does actually allow you to make adjustments, but then it has to go through the whole process of refreezing it, which is super annoying. In Pro Tools, it doesn't even let you touch the track at all. The track is locked. It's got like lines across it showing you can't touch it. With Ableton Live, because it's actually freezing the individual clips, we can actually still go in here and move the clips around. We can't split the clips. Oh, I guess we can split the clips too. It's really interesting the way it works with Ableton Live. Do I do drill? I do not do drill. I'm sorry. I don't do drill, no. And then FL is the easiest. I mean, whatever. Cool. You can leave if you don't want to learn about Ableton Live. It's all good. Now what I always do with this though is I always take this one step further. I don't stop on freezing. And same thing with Pro Tools. I don't recommend freezing your tracks in Pro Tools. I recommend committing the tracks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click on this and I'm gonna flatten it. And that's basically the Ableton Live definition of committing. So I flatten it and it turns it all into audio here. So now this, let me just drag this over here. This is a loop, which has, hold on a second. Wait, that's the wrong loop here. Let's drag this one over, this one. And you can hear what I did with the filter on here. If I loop it, you can hear the filter changing over time. Now, what it did was it actually took away my my effects that were on there. So now the automation, everything is all gone. This is good and bad. I'm gonna actually undo all that and go back here to where before I froze it. This is good and bad. The reason why it's good is because working with audio is awesome. Working with audio, freezing and flattening does a couple things. It frees up CPU space, like usage. So if you have like an instrument that you're using that uses a lot of your processor power, like Massive X or Omnisphere or something like that, it'll free up your computer processing for other stuff, which is great, especially if you're using an older machine. But what's tricky about it with Ableton Live compared to Pro Tools or Logic, with Logic they have the feature called bounce in place. With Pro Tools they have commit. And with those, what you do is you right click and you choose commit, and then it allows you to say, like in Pro Tools you can commit up to a certain plugin. So I can right click on just if I just wanted to bounce my drums but keep my filter, I can right click and I can go just freeze up to this one or commit up to this one here, and it will just commit my MIDI instrument, turn that into audio, and all my effects are still on the track. Ableton Live doesn't have a way to do that, which drives me nuts. It's going to be my new thing that I complain about with Ableton Live, because now with Ableton Live 11 that's coming out, they finally added in playlists and for comping vocals, which was my big complaint. Now my big complaint is going to be fix the way it does freeze and flatten, which we're getting super picky here, but whatever. I live in 2021 and I'm in New York City, so I can have my picky little problems here. So what I recommend doing with this stuff is if you want to just freeze your instrument, what you should do is make a new audio track. And this is a little bit of a chore, but take your effects and drag them onto that audio track. Now, when you do that, any kind of automation is going to go with it. So your automation will change tracks. If I go look at my automation in here, my auto filter, we can see my frequency is here. Don't listen to it at this point because it's not going to sound right. Then right click and freeze, and then right click again and then flatten. And then take your effects that you had over here and drag them back onto the track, and now they'll be on the correct track again. Is it fun to do this? No. Does it take up extra time that I could be using for making my beats? Yes. Is there any way around it? No. You just have to live with it. It is what it is, and that's it. So, yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. So just deal with it for now. Write some angry letters to Ableton over in Berlin. I just made your day. Great. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. That's the funny thing about these lessons is that even if you're really good with, like James is like an Ableton Live, like he could be teaching most of these lessons. I'm sure there's a few things in here that he's picked up across, occasionally that it's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could do that. Because there's always something, the interesting thing about live is that my experience with it has been that there's a lot of different people use it in different ways because it is a very versatile program, and there's always something you can learn. So I love it when I'm watching people using live and making beats and stuff like that. I have a bunch of stuff downloaded onto my computer, like various people. Yeah, it looks like we're going to get Ableton 12 for that fix. James, absolutely, yep. Yeah, did you go look online and see if they had it in there? They don't have it in there. I know for a fact they don't have it in there because I was like, okay, we need playlists or comping, and we need this other, freeze and flatten at a certain point. They don't mention about that at all. So it's definitely going to be live 12 for that one. Yep, for sure. All right, so that's what we do here. Now, of course, if you are using a bunch of plugins and you, like for example, this hi-hat loop here this has basically become a new audio loop, right? So let's go freeze and flatten on this one here. Right click, freeze, right click, flatten, and now we can see my new audio loop here. But let's say, for example, that I really want to keep my old hi-hat loop just in case I wanted to make changes to it or something like that. Well, here's what you have to do. What we could do is we can freeze it once and then duplicate it and then flatten one of them, and then the other one just disable all the audio stuff that's on it. Click it and hit 0 and it will disable it. And that way it's not using anything. It's not using any of these down here. And then I always like to color things white that I'm not using, or actually if it's frozen and flattened, it's not going to use it, and just put it down here at the bottom. So I'm not using it. So I know I'm not using it. And that way it's not actually utilizing these plugins. They're not being used in the processor at all. But if I did want to go back and make changes at some point, I could. This is really just to help your processor and help any kind of like the organization, so that if you're like me and you're like, I might want to change that at some point in the future, then save it. As I've gotten older as a producer and an engineer, I don't do that as much because now I'm becoming more of like, I like to embrace the moment. But back when I was starting off so many years ago at this point, I used to try to keep everything because I might want to change it, later down the road. And now I'm just like, what? I like the sound. I'm never going to change it. I don't want to change it. I want to keep my flow going. So, and my advice is try to let go as soon as possible. Like try to adopt that way of working, that mentality. For example, if you're recording a guitar using like Amplitude or Guitar Rig or something like that, record the guitar through Guitar Rig and record the Guitar Rig version of it and not the original guitar version of it, because that forces you to stick with that sound that you created. What are people saying here? Joe says, my conspiracy theory is DAWs keep back simple features and slowly release them in updates to keep people's interest in their software. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. It's easier to understand. I agree with you. And then, don't want to disrupt your class plan, but what is your basic advice for mixing? Mix from the bottom up. We'll come back to that because that's actually a good question. And then, yeah, Curvy Barbie says the same things. Mixing is super hard. Makes it hard to make DAWs in the first place. Yeah, we'll come back to that in just a second. Let me just make sure I've not got any other stuff here, because that's a really good question, and we've covered it with Pro Tools before, but I just want to show you again in Ableton Live here how I would do something like that. Just a basic mix down thing right before we go to this next part here, but let me just see where we are. Flatten, freeze, and flatten. Render track. Okay, so exporting in Live. Before we talk about this, let's just do a refresher on a basic mix. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up, here, let's pull this one up here. Here. So this is a track that I can do a basic mix on. Curry Barbie says, my biggest problem, for example, is just getting on with making a beat, for example, because MIDI sounds so bad until you finish mixing and mastering everything so that it sounds good. I don't know if that makes sense. It 100% makes sense. And I think this is a problem that a lot of people have, is that, and I've had, some of the UAD plugins that are disabled. I'll learn about. No, I don't need to learn about it. Okay, I know what's going on here. So a problem that a lot of people have, and I've had friends who are, let's say you start off as a DJ, and you're listening to really good music all the time, and it sounds great. And at some point in your career, you're like, I need to produce, because really to level up your career as a DJ, the next step is you got to produce. So you've been listening to amazingly produced tracks your whole life or your whole career so far, and you start to make music and it sounds like garbage, and you're like, why does this sound so bad? And the reason is because raw sounds do not sound good by themselves. Every single sound that you're hearing has been processed. Even if you're using samples and stuff like that, the samples have been processed. You just didn't process them. You just went and found a sample that somebody else processed. So, for example, if you're making techno music, let's say you're making Detroit techno, which is very minimal style stuff, and it's like a 909 drum machine, and your favorite producer is just like, yeah, I just use a 909 drum machine. That person does not just use a 909 drum machine. What they use is a 909 drum machine run through effects like compressors and distortions and saturators and EQs and stuff like that. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes with the effects than what you see like on the surface. So, right. So what we have to do, and here's what I do, is that I get a certain sound, and I know in my head I'm going to make it sound good eventually. But depending on the sound, I like to make it sound good as soon as possible, because that's inspiring to me. Because I'm the same way. Like, I don't like it when things sound bad. I like it when things sound good. So I put effects on there, and I'm at the point now where I've done it so much that I know what sounds like. I know which effects to use. That's just a learning process that you have to go through. You have to practice, like, what's going to make my bass sound good? What's going to make my drums sound good? There are some shortcuts that, for example, for drums, like, for example, this drum group here, we can see my drum group down here. I've got a multi-band compression. I've got UAD. I've got drums full parallel on here. I've got some stuff here. And it's not that much. It's just a matter of knowing what to put on here. So, for example, this UAD, if we're just using Ableton Live effects, for example, saturator, this one here, a bit warmer, is a really good kind of tape emulation. So let's go ahead and solo this drums out here. Okay, so this is for a track, one of my tracks that we did like a year or so ago. I like it because it's kind of commercial-ish. And let's turn each one of these on. So when I turn this stuff on, I'm going to turn my level up here a little bit. Actually, what I'll do is turn on my limiter here. going to turn all this stuff off on my main. There we go. So I'm just going to turn up the limiter here a little bit so it's a little bit louder on the output. So with this drum group here, and you can see all the tracks I've got in this session here. I've got 48, these 2 tracks on the end are not being used right now. So I've got 46 different tracks in here, not including my reverbs and stuff like that. So it's a lot going on. A lot of these only have a few different bits and bobs in them because I do separate out my effects and stuff like that. But all my basses and things are down here, and my drums are up here. And you can see I've got things color coded like I showed y'all in Pro Tools and stuff like that. So in here, I've got these drums. Let's hear it without the drum group here. There's what the drums sound like with no effects, and they sound okay. The kick drum is actually a kick drum that I like. I've used in a couple of tracks. The other sounds are just like weird little sounds that I made and things like that. And now we pull this on, and you can hear it pops things out. It's a little bit louder, but it's kind of popping things out a little bit, warming things up if it's a bit warmer. And I've got this parallel drum on here. Now let's pull in that sub in here. The sub was frozen at some point. I froze it, which I had some effects on it and stuff like that. Let's loop this section here, the go section. And let's get these other bass sounds in here. All right. Now, one thing I will say is that having analog synthesizers helps a lot, because analog synths just sound amazing without anything. This is my Moog synthesizer. Let me take the chorus off so you can hear it without the chorus. Okay. There it is with the chorus, without the chorus. And it sounds pretty good. That chorus really spreads it out a lot though. It makes it sound much better on either side. And this tom bass thing is also was from my Moog synth. There it is with that one. Okay, let's turn on this alarm sound. I think this is like a tail of something else actually, so it's not much. And this is a very like basic sound, because it's a very empty song. It's like done. I did that on purpose, but you hear back here in this background. Here, let's turn all this stuff off.
Let me know you.
Hear this sound in the background here. Little sounds like this really help to kind of like bring it up. Like, it's not something people really hear that much, but it does help the overall sound of the song.
The vibe, drop it, slide, side to side, do it good, do it right, drop it, slide.
And the reason why this song is so empty really is because there's this vocal in here. Let's go back over here to the start part here. Now, going back to the original question is, where was it here? Was how do I mix a song? So, yeah, what is your best advice for mixing? So the best advice is start from the bottom and build up like this. So, like you would build a house. You don't build a house by suspending the roof and then put everything underneath it. What you do for most houses, how you build a house is you build the foundation first. And the foundations are big and deep. For example, the Twin Towers in New York City, the Empire State Building, and when they built it back in what was it, like the 50s and 60s or whenever it was that they built it, they displaced so much land that became Battery Park. If you are familiar with New York, if you're in New York and you're familiar with Battery Park is big and there's like houses on it and stuff like that. All that didn't exist before they built the original World Trade Center. They took so much land out of it that they had to put it somewhere, so they put it over there. It's a lot. And when you build, the higher the building you build, the bigger the bass has to be. And the same thing with the song. With the music, with the song, you have to make sure that your drums and your bass, your rhythm section, are taken care of first. So if we go over here, to this part here, I would solo out my drums and make sure my drums sound pretty good. Let's go over here to the shakers section over here. Let's hear the shakers in there. There we go. There we go. Pull this up a little bit. Pull those up a little bit there. Okay. And, you know, they don't take over the song in this case. It's not like a, but you can hear them in there. These drums sound pretty good, right? And now we pull in our low end here. And pardon me, I'm just working with these headphones here, so the mix might sound a little bit weird. So maybe we want to pull this low end up here to make it a little bit more bumping. Right? Let's pull in these low ends here. Right? And that's our foundation for the song. Anything else that we want to have in here has to be layered on top of this. And this is where we start. Once I started making my mixes like this, started focusing on my drums first, mute everything else. So solo out your drums, have everything else muted, and then bring it in, right? It's gonna make it makes you focus on the right things, especially for dance music. Our friend earlier said drill music. I don't make drill music, but the mix principles would be exactly the same. If you're making trap, hip hop, whatever, it doesn't matter what you're making, house music, any of this stuff, build it from the drums and the rhythm section and then put everything else up inside of it. Here, let's go ahead and listen to this section here.
Let me see you drop a slide.
Right, and you can hear everything else fits in with that. Now, this is a very sparse song. There's not a whole lot going on with it, so it makes it really easy to bring those drums out. But I guarantee you, if you focus in on stuff like this, you're going to be good to go. All right, so that was my very quick explanation of it. There's actually another video. If you go to my YouTube channel, if somebody, Joe or James or somebody could put a link to the YouTube channel in the chat, that would be awesome. But if you go to the YouTube channel and check out all the videos there, you can see everything there. I do have a whole day I spend talking about mixing. All right, so now we're gonna bounce this stuff out. Now in Ableton Live, the first thing I'm gonna do here is, the link actually might be in my About section. I'm gonna go in here and put this in here. I'm gonna turn all this stuff on. I'm just gonna turn my volume down on the master. I don't usually turn the volume down on the master, but I don't want it to make it too loud for everybody else. Okay, so let's just go.
Drop it side to side, do it good, do it right. Drop it side to side, do it till you move it right. Drop it side to side, make you feel it in your thighs. Drop it side to side, let me know you feel the vibe. Drop it side.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it. All right, so in here, this is like, what I've done is I've got my mastering chain on here, and it sounds a little bit weird to my ears right now because the real mix, this is not the real mix that was released. The real mix was using a bunch of different plugins from UAD and stuff like that, which I don't have my UAD device connected up, so there's none of that. So anyway, we've got this in here. We got it so it sounds pretty good. We like the way it sounds. It's nice and loud. Now what I'm going to do is you can see I put my markers in here. And to put a marker in, you just right click where you want to put the marker, just hit add locator, which I talked about in another lesson. I go over here and I highlight where I want to bounce out. Oh, my mouse just stopped working again. Thanks, mouse. I appreciate you. Turn it off and then back on again. There we go. Mouse, come on. Come on, mouse. Turn on. Ugh. If you missed it in the beginning of class, I was saying my friend ran off with my cables last night when he left. And all my other cables are in storage right now, so my mouse has Bluetooth weirdness sometimes with my computer. Oh, come on, buddy. So it's like not working. Yeah. Is it working now? Yeah, it's terrible. I woke up, I was like, okay, let me turn everything on. I was like, all Okay, there we go. All right. So what I do is I highlight the section over here. There we go. And I like to hit Command L on it. Now you don't have to hit Command L on it. What it does, it just kind of creates a loop. And I turn the loop off. But I just like to have this bar running across the top so I just know what I'm about to bounce out. Really all you have to do is just select the part that you're going to bounce out. But I've got this stuff here. And I've got the section bounce like set up there. I'm going to bounce. And I hit Command Option, not B, Command Shift R. Command Shift R, or over here under Live, Export Audio Video, right? What are you moving around for? Did you sleep enough? I feel like she didn't sleep very well last night. I feel like she was like staring at the window all night. All right, so in here we have a few things, and if we look at the notes here, the rendered track, master, all individual tracks if you're exporting stems, selected tracks if you're just selecting out certain tracks, and then one track only is for the track that you want to just have, if you just want to bounce out one track. Some options here, render as a loop. If you are just rendering a loop and you want to keep the reverb tail or the delay tail, it'll go ahead and render it like that. Convert to mono if you're bouncing out bass sounds or whatever. I usually, if you're bouncing out for Pro Tools and you want to make sure your basses, like your kicks and your basses, are in mono, I do all that in Pro Tools. I don't worry about it in Ableton Live. I used to do it in Ableton Live. It actually takes longer in Live than it does in Pro Tools to deal with it. Normalize, don't use normalize. Unless you're doing drum sample editing, don't use normalize. And then create analysis file. Only use this if you're going to use the export audio in another Ableton Live session. So if you're bringing it back into Ableton Live, use this. Alice is talking about my mouse. You check the battery on my mouse. Yeah, actually, I just changed the battery on the mouse. It's not that. It's yeah. But thank you. That's at first I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And then I checked the battery and it was the battery. But right now I know it's not the battery. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in here to my rendered track. I'm going to select that to master. See all individual tracks or selected tracks only. And then I've got my individual tracks here. But let's do master. Render start, that should be what you highlighted. Rendering options, include return and master effects. Definitely, if you're bouncing out to send it out to your friends or whatever, definitely include that. Sample rate, change that to 44.1. The reason why that was set for 48 was because I was making music for some videos the other day. So that's why it was set for 48. If you're sending music to put into digital video, set it for 48K, but otherwise set your sample rate for 44.1. PCM, always use wave. Always use wave. Don't use AIF. Don't use FLAC unless you really want to use FLAC. But wave is the most compatible. Bit depth 24. Dither options. If you want to set this to power 3, you can. My recommendation is really, unless you know what you're doing with dither, don't use dither. Sorry, I'm going to let these fire people go past. Maybe. Oh, it sounds like they turned a corner somewhere. All right, cool. MP3. Turn on the MP3 bounce. Yep, and then it'll let you set up your options after you hit OK. You can upload directly to SoundCloud if you want to. I never do because I like to keep everything on my computer and then upload it on my own time with like artwork and stuff like that. Create a video. If you are doing video stuff, and you can do some cool video editing things in Ableton Live, you can do that. It's a thing that most people don't really know about with Ableton, is you can do looping and warping and stuff of videos in Live. It's pretty interesting. And then you can hit export. Ableton teaching files. Let's put it into the correct folder here. The automation. There we go. Oh, actually, it's a different one. Whatever. I'll just put it on my desktop. So drop and slide. It's good. Hit OK. Hit save. The reason why it says it's good is not because I label things like that's good. It's for It's Good TV, which is Dirty Bird and like Walker and Royce and those guys. I was doing a session like this for them, and I was using this song for that on Twitch. So hit go, and it's saying they're disabled. Yes, I know they're disabled. So there we go. Now it's exporting the audio. Oh, I forgot. I did say the MP3 would pull up later. Actually, it doesn't. That's a Pro Tools thing. Sorry, I forgot. Ableton Live doesn't put any of the data into the MP3s. My dog is so cute right now. Oh. While that's exporting. Do a close up on the dog. Whoa. Like, seriously? That's like the cutest little beast in the world. Yep. Yep. All right, so this is almost done bouncing out. So once it bounces out, it'll show up wherever you told it to show up. Please make sure, I've had a bunch of people in my classes over the years, always, they don't always look at where they bounce things out, and then they ask me where it is. I can't tell you where it is. Like, there's no way, like, I don't know where it is. So when you're bouncing things out or when you're committing or whatever, you've got to make sure that you know where it's putting stuff on your computer. So always make sure you pay attention to it. Or if you know the name of the file, you can do a search for the name of the file on your computer. But unfortunately, nobody else can help you. If you lose a file because you don't remember where you bounced it, my advice, and this is what I've done in the past, is rebounce it. Like, I've had moments that we all do. I've had moments where I'm just like, I do not know where I put this thing at all. And I just have to rebounce it. Because maybe I even forgot like what I named it. Maybe I named the bounce something different than the original file. And I'm just like, I don't know what this is called. So I rebounce it. It's sometimes easier than trying to chase it around. All right, so we go into my desktop and there it is. Drop and slide, wave, and MP3. Cool, then you can do whatever with it at that point. Let's see, let's just check the notes to make sure we're good here. Yep, cool. Yep, yeah, we're good, yeah. PCM, wave, and the other options, don't use this unless you know what it is and when is the right time to use it. Sweet. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop. We actually went over a few more things than I expected, but I'm gonna stop the recording now.